one of the additional factors that is, and let's just keep this in context of what we've been talking about, the diffusion of gases depends upon five big factors. The first was the partial pressure of gases, and that determined which way the gases were going to actually move. Were they going to go into or out of the capillary? Were they going to go into or out of the tissues? That we already talked about that in part 4. The delivery of air and some of these other factors are what we'll talk about now. So let's move to delivery of air, and here now we need to talk about minute volume. And minute volume is a mathematical figure. It's a number expressed in milliliters per minute, and it is the number of respirations you're breathing per minute times your tidal volume. So we said before that the tidal volume is approximately 500 mLs, and if you're breathing 10 times per minute, 10 times 500 would be 5,000 mLs. That would be your total minute volume. So you would know that if you're breathing, you have an increased tidal volume, that means you're going to take in more oxygen, and you will end up with a higher concentration, a higher PO2 in your blood. You'll have a higher oxygen level in your blood, in your alveolus, and then eventually, getting into your bloodstream with increased respirations per minute, meaning a higher minute volume. And also with CO2, the more you breathe, you're actually breathing out CO2. So if you increase your minute volume, you're going to have lower PCO2 in your alveolus. You're going to be breathing out, and in your blood as well, you're going to be breathing off more CO2. So the more fast you breathe, meaning the higher your minute volume, the lower your CO2 will become because you'll be blowing it off. Okay, so that's basically all we're going to say about minute volume. You need to just know the definition for minute volume, and that when you increase your minute volume, you'll generally be increasing your oxygen level and you'll be decreasing your CO2 level. Now we'll talk about pulmonary blood flow, and we need to remember that the blood comes through the pulmonary arteries to the lung capillaries, and that blood is deoxygenated, so we would think of it as blue blood, or less oxygenated. And in this little image, it's kind of small. It's a picture from another textbook, but here's the arterial blood, the pulmonary artery, and the what's actually happening is that, and I can't really see this well enough to be able to help you here, but at any rate, what happens is the blood that comes to the lung, when the blood comes in, ideally it comes in and there's normal airflow to all the alveoli, and so there will be a nice normal amount of blood. The blood will continue to flow to all the capillaries around those alveoli, and it will go on and do its thing. However, if you have decreased oxygen in the alveolus, what happens is, for some reason, let's say there's a problem with the alveolus, let's say it breaks or it ruptures, what happens is you will, because of that, there is no need to send blood to that alveolus that's not there anymore. Let's say that it's broken, it's been destroyed. There will be vasoconstriction of the arterioles, and there will be decreased blood flow into the capillaries that are trying to exchange in an alveolus that has low oxygen. So what happens is it looks like this. There's low alveolar PO2 in this alveolus, and what happens is there's no blood flow to that alveolus. Why waste the effort? Because there's not enough gas going there. There's not enough oxygen in that alveolus. So whenever you have an area of your lung that has decreased oxygen in the alveoli, you're going to have vasoconstriction of the arterioles, and you're going to have decreased blood flow into those capillaries that are around the low oxygen alveolus. So the conclusion that we will make is that perfusion or blood flow will match ventilation or oxygen delivery, meaning if you have plenty of oxygen, you're going to get plenty of blood flow to that alveolus. However, if you do not have sufficient oxygen in that alveolus, you're going to have decreased blood flow to that area. And that makes sense, because if there's no oxygen coming into that alveolus, there's no point sending blood there to that area. Another thing that's important to remember is this, and you don't know this yet, but you will now. The blood hydrostatic pressure, or BHP, in your lungs is less than the BHP in your typical tissue beds of your systemic circulation. So your BHP in your lungs, I'll say that again, your BHP in your lungs is less than the BHP in your systemic tissue beds. This will slow down the velocity of blood, and that gives you a little more time for gas exchange in the lungs, and that's a very, very good thing. Another difference is that in the lung capillary, your pulmonary BCOP, or blood colloid osmotic pressure, that, remember, it's due to plasma proteins, is greater than the pulmonary blood hydrostatic pressure, or this BHP or CHP, however you want to call it. So your osmotic pressure, the sucking in force, is greater than the pushing out force. So there is no fluid movement out of the capillary into the lung tissue and alveoli. That is also a very, very good thing, because you don't want excess fluid in your lungs. That's going to cause problems if you are needing to exchange gases in the lungs. You don't want a lot of water and fluid in there. So in the lungs, you have a difference in there. So in your alveolar capillaries, your CHP is going to be less than your BCOP. I said it a different way up here. I said your BCOP is greater than your CHP. That's the same thing, and that's simply saying that there's going to be a net inward movement of fluid rather than a net outward movement of fluid. That means your net filtration pressure is going to be negative. You're going to not be losing any fluid in your lungs in a normal, healthy lung. Well, if I could do this, that would be great. Make this thing stop. Okay. Okay. Well, I can't advance the slide. I don't know why I can't advance the slide. There we go. Okay, now in pulmonary hypertension, think about it, high blood pressure within the lungs, you have a higher BHP, or capillary hydrostatic CHP, whichever. You have a high pressure in your blood. That will cause edema. There will be fluid in your alveoli. And if you have fluid there in that alveolar area, you're going to have a much more difficult time for diffusion to occur. So when your BHP is greater than your BOP or BCOP, fluid is going to leak from your capillary to your alveolus. That will produce something called pulmonary edema, and that is a medically serious situation. Causes coughing and lack of proper oxygen and CO2 exchange. So another factor is the surface area for exchange, um, another factor of diffusion. And again, if you have a lung that has a lot of the lung tissue that has a lot of edema in it, will you have increased surface area or decreased surface area for exchange? Well, you would have decreased surface area for exchange, because if you have damaged lung tissue, you're going to have less area for gas exchange. Another factor is the diffusion distance for exchange. And remember, this is our distance for diffusion. There's our alveolar airspace, alveolar epithelial cell, endothelial cell. And if we have any thickening of any of these layers due to fibrosis or due to cells that might be infiltrating the area, or anything that would thicken these areas, inflammation, anything like that will increase the diffusion distance. If you have a thicker membrane, you're going to have less diffusion. Therefore, you're going to have more problems breathing. So here's our review picture, just reminding you about external respiration, gas exchange between your alveolus and your lung capillary. And then we have internal respiration, which is exchange of gases between your systemic capillaries and your tissues. And again, you can review. I do want you to remember these numbers of what the alveolar air PO2 and PCO2 is, and your incoming blood, and your arterial blood, and your systemic blood. So those numbers are not that difficult to remember, to hold on to. Okay, this is a good place to stop. We'll pick up next time with the next topic, which is how does blood travel in the blood? How does oxygen rather travel in the bloodstream? And how does CO2 travel in the bloodstream? Okay, thanks.